A poor man had 3 daughters who were not married yet. One morning, the eldest daughter felt strange pain in her stomach and unusual fatigue. The father thought it was just a minor illness, so he took her to the doctor. After a quick examination, the doctor looked at him with a strange expression and said, "Your daughter is pregnant." The news hit the father like a lightning bolt. His face froze, his features paled, and the daughter couldn't comprehend what was being said. On their way back home, neither spoke a word, except for the father's tears, which raced with his steps. When they got home, the father sat down with his daughter and said, his voice trembling with intense emotion, "Tell me, who did this to you? Who defiled our honor?" The daughter burst into tears, falling to her knees before him. "I swear to you, father, I didn't do anything. I don't know how this happened. I never spoke to anyone, I swear by God. I don't know how this child got into my womb." Enraged, the father raised his hand and slapped her, then beat her severely until her shoulders were bruised and her eyes swollen from crying. She kept repeating, her voice shaking, "I swear by God I did nothing. I fear God. I have not sinned." Days passed, and her belly grew before their eyes. The more it grew, the deeper the sadness in the father's heart and the suspicion that consumed his mind. He didn't see his daughter as a liar, but he couldn't find an explanation and had no answer to give to others. As the days went on, the situation became unbearable. The eldest daughter spent most of her time silent, her eyes full of sorrow, and her body growing weaker with each passing day as her belly grew bigger. Then, one evening, the second daughter was preparing food when she suddenly felt dizzy and fainted. The youngest daughter rushed to her father, and he carried her, worried, to the same doctor. After a brief examination, the doctor gave him that same heavy look and said the same words, "Your daughter is pregnant." The words stuck in the father's throat, and he couldn't respond. He stared at the doctor in silence, as if time had stopped for a moment. He returned home, feeling as though he was walking without knowing his steps, and sat the second daughter before him, asking in a voice worn out by exhaustion, "Tell me, is this a nightmare? Who did this to you?" The daughter burst into tears. "I swear to you, father, no one has touched me. I don't know how this happened. I've never spoken to a man in my life. I don't know how this child got into my womb." The father buried his head in his hands and began striking the ground with his fists, muttering, "What is happening to my daughters? Am I in a dream?" More days passed, and the house remained filled with gloom, fear, and tears until the third blow came. The youngest daughter began complaining of the same symptoms. The father was struck with a trembling fear and immediately took her to the doctor himself, his heart burning with dread. The final news came. "Your youngest daughter is also pregnant." The father no longer had a voice to shout with. He sat alone, holding his head in his hands, crying like a child. His tears were not of weakness, but from an unbearable pain, a mystery that gnawed at his mind. He kept asking through his tears, "Who did this to my daughters? Who violated the sanctity of our home without my knowledge? Are we cursed, or is someone playing with us from where we cannot see?" He found no answer, only questions that tore at his soul. His hands trembled with confusion more than pain. 3 daughters, 3 growing bellies, and 3 secrets with no explanation. The weight of the uncertainty exhausted him, and his heart was consumed with helplessness. He felt there was no choice but to rise and go to the village judge. The judge was an old, calm man with an air of authority that everyone respected. The father knocked timidly on the door, and when he entered, he said, "O Sheikh, I am in a great affliction, and I don't know how it began. My 3 daughters have become pregnant, and they have never defiled our honor or left the house except with my company. I swear by God, I raised them with nothing but fear of God and modesty." The judge slowly raised his head, staring at him for a long moment, then said, "All 3 of them?" The father nodded, tears flooding his white beard. "And none of them know how this happened? They all swore by God and cried until their tears dried up?" "I believe them," the judge said, "but I cannot understand. He fell silent for a moment before speaking in a deep tone. "This is a grave matter. If you and your daughters are telling the truth, then this is not the act of man. Tell me, what happened since you arrived in this village?" The father began recounting what had happened. How life had been harsh and the hardships had piled up after the death of his wife. He had been left alone to raise his daughters, working tirelessly at any job he could find to feed them and keep them from need. Despite his old age and slowly deteriorating health, he fought against poverty for years, raising his daughters with modesty and good character. They grew up to be virtuous, modest, and pure, leaving the house only rarely and never looking anyone in the eye. But life had not been kind to them. Debts accumulated and their income decreased until they were left with no choice but to move. The father decided to move to this village, hearing that life here was easier, quieter, and less chaotic than the city that had suffocated them with poverty. When they arrived, a man who didn't seem strange to the place approached them confidently. His gaze carried a mix of kindness and scrutiny as he said quietly, "You are the newcomers, aren't you? Let me help you." There was nothing suspicious in his voice. He seemed to want to offer help without expecting anything in return. He helped them carry their belongings to an old house on the outskirts of the village that the father had rented. The house wasn't spacious, but it was warm and seemed suitable for all of them. That night, the father sat with his daughters around the oil lamp, trying to instill hope in them and reassure them that the coming days would be better. Little did he know that every step they had taken toward this village would mark the beginning of what was happening to him and his daughters now. Since their arrival, the man had not once failed to ask about them. Every morning, he came with something: 2 pieces of bread, a bowl of soup, or a small bag of fruit, without waiting for thanks or compensation. The father had initially refused out of pride and dignity, but had soon been forced to accept when he saw his daughters suffering from hunger. The man began visiting them frequently, bringing whatever supplies he could, always checking on the daughters with apparent kindness and dignity that raised no suspicion. He spoke with the father about job opportunities and even offered to help him repair the house. He also brought some simple tools for the father. As for the daughters, they thanked him shyly whenever they saw him, lowering their heads in respect without speaking a word. Over time, his presence became familiar, and his face no longer seemed strange in the house. "That man is kind," the father said one night, watching his daughters eat the food he brought, his eyes filled with sorrow and gratitude. He didn't know that sometimes kindness could be a mask, and that the first step towards ruin often begins with the person who helps you when you have nothing. The judge remained silent for several long minutes after the father finished his story. He stared at the ground, his eyes distant, as his mind searched through the words for a missing thread. The judge whispered to himself, 3 girls in one house, never mixing with anyone. How could this happen? Is it possible for such an event to occur without leaving any trace? He then lifted his gaze to the father and asked calmly, "Since when did you notice the first signs of pregnancy in your eldest daughter?" The father replied, "About 3 months ago." After a month, the second daughter began to show, and then the third. The judge's features tightened, and he began to mutter to himself, "This doesn't seem like coincidence. This appears planned." He took a deep breath, speaking with sharp clarity. If this was the act of a man, he must have been unbelievably careful. But if it's something other than man, then the matter is more dangerous than we think. He looked at the father and said with firm resolve, "I want to see your daughters, all 3 of them. I'll come tomorrow and speak with them one by one. But before that, do not allow that man to enter your home again." The father nodded in agreement. However, despite his calm demeanor, the judge felt that a mask had been carefully placed and that the time to tear it off was drawing near. The next day, the judge knocked on the door of the house, where he was greeted by the father, who bowed his head, barely lifting his eyes due to overwhelming shame and humiliation. He motioned for the judge to enter and whispered, "My daughters are inside, as you asked, sir." The judge entered the main room and found the 3 girls sitting, their heads bent towards the ground, as if the burden they carried was too heavy to bear. The judge didn't need to examine them closely. Their bellies spoke for themselves. 3 pregnancies, 3 girls at similar stages, and the situation had been carried out with such subtlety that it left no trace, no suspicion. He approached them, sat silently before them, and then spoke in a calm but firm tone. "I want to hear from each of you. Tell me, do you know who the father of this child is?" The eldest daughter lifted her head, her eyes glistening with tears. "I swear to you, sir, I don't know. No one touched me. No one came near me. I swear by God." The second daughter spoke. I say the same, I don't know. I never felt anything. I never mixed with anyone." Then the youngest daughter said, "I too, sir. I don't know anything, and I didn't do anything." The judge stared at them for a long time. In their eyes there was genuine fear, something that couldn't be faked. But how could honesty in their eyes coincide with the impossibility of what had happened? Could these girls really be victims of something they didn't even understand? Slowly the judge rose and moved towards the door. Before he left, he whispered to the father, "What I've seen today is unbelievable, but my heart tells me there's a secret being kept in the shadows and we will uncover it no matter the cost." He left, leaving behind confused daughters and a father consumed by questions, with a wall of mystery growing ever thicker. The judge walked out of the old man's house, his heart pounding with questions, his mind restless, and his soul uneasy. He sat in his office and closed the door behind him. Then he murmured to himself, "How can 3 girls become pregnant without marriage? How does this happen in a house known for its chastity and good reputation? And who is this man who suddenly appeared in their lives and entered their home? Is it a coincidence or something planned in the dark?" He lowered his head for a moment, then raised his sharp eyes with determination and said firmly, "I will not leave this matter until I uncover this mystery." That evening, he called one of his trusted men and whispered in his ear, "Watch the old man's house. Don't get too close, just observe. I want to know if anyone enters or leaves, especially after midnight." On the first night, the observer sat far away, keeping his eyes fixed on the house. Nothing happened. It was complete silence. The second night, the same silence. No sounds, no movements, no strange visitors. The observer returned to the judge and said, "There's nothing, sir. The house is as it is, no movement, no visitors." The judge nodded, a hint of doubt appearing on his face for a moment. Could I be wrong? Have I imagined evil where there was none? He straightened up in his chair, then said with confidence, "Observe again, another night." The truth doesn't hide for long. On the third night, the observer took his position as usual, watching the house in silence. Suddenly, he saw the man approaching the father's home. He was carrying a water jug and some food. He stopped in front of the door, placed what he was carrying on the ground quietly, then turned and left without speaking to anyone or entering the house. Without hesitation, the observer went straight to the judge and told him what he had seen. The judge sat in silence, then began speaking to himself. Why does he come so secretly? What does he want from them? Is this food innocent, or does it carry something we can't see? And why did their calamity begin the moment he entered their lives? He quickly turned to the observer and said, "Go back now. Watch him closely. If he returns, capture him immediately. Don't give him any chance to escape." The next night, the observer sat in his usual position, watching the road leading to the old man's house with his daughters. The night was heavy with stillness, and the silence enveloped the place until he saw a shadow moving quietly through the darkness. The man approached with steady steps, carrying a small container and a bag of food, placing them, as usual, in front of the door. But before he turned to leave, the observer emerged from his hiding place and shouted, "Stop right there!" The man froze in place, slowly turning to face him. "I'm not doing anything wrong, I'm just helping them," he said. The observer grabbed him firmly and dragged him to the judge without any resistance. The man sat before the judge, his hands bound, while the judge stared at him with piercing eyes that seemed to penetrate his very soul. The judge gestured to the observer to leave, then spoke in a calm but seething voice. "Where were you after the girls became pregnant, and why did you disappear?" The man fell silent, avoiding eye contact with the judge, then said, "I was watching from afar. I was afraid someone would discover my actions. The judge spoke in a loud voice. Do you realize what you've done? Do you understand the crime you've committed? The man closed his eyes, his face marked by shame and defeat. I thought no one would uncover me. I believed they were weak and no one would defend them. A heavy silence filled the room. Then the judge's tears began to flow, his voice trembling with anger as he spoke. Your heart is dead, your conscience is gone, and you committed that heinous act against pure hearts that had no strength to resist. The only sounds left in the room were the judge's sobs and the man's muffled groans. The scene was now on the verge of revealing the full truth before everyone. The following morning, the judge ordered the entire village to gather in the central square. The poor father and his 3 daughters arrived with pale faces and trembling hearts, unsure of what awaited them. The judge stood on a raised platform, with the guilty man chained and surrounded by guards. He spoke in a loud, commanding voice so that all could hear. People, gather to hear what has shaken my heart and wounded my soul. Gather to learn the truth. He turned to the father and motioned for him to step forward. He looked at him with tearful eyes and said, You and your daughters are innocent. The one who committed this heinous act is the man who claimed to be helping you, the one who pretended to be kind and generous. The judge then recounted in front of everyone the confession of the man who admitted to drugging the father and his daughters with sedatives in their food, causing them to fall into a deep sleep, and then violating their sanctity while they were unconscious. A collective gasp echoed through the crowd, and silence fell. Then cries of shock and disbelief erupted from the people. The father collapsed to his knees, weeping as though his soul had been stolen from him. Oh God, how did I not realize? How could I not protect my daughters? The 3 daughters covered their faces with their hands, their hearts shattered before the eyes of the entire village. The judge continued, his voice breaking with emotion. You have not wronged anyone, you have not defiled anything, and you have not committed any sin. This man alone is the criminal, and he is the one who will be held accountable. He then raised a sealed document and said, In my name, and in the name of the villagers, we declare your innocence before all, and we order that all the wealth, land, and possessions of this man be transferred to you as compensation for the pain you have endured. The guards, at the judge's command, immediately executed the death sentence on the man, and by sunset, justice had been served. And so the curtain fell on a tragic tale, but justice had spoken, and innocence had been declared, even though the wounds would never truly heal. In the months that followed, with the help of the villagers and the judge, the father and his daughters slowly began to recover from what they had endured, finding warmth in life once again. The traces of their suffering began to fade, and smiles returned to their once somber faces. They lived again, by the grace of God, under the light of truth, no matter how painful it was. The justice of the heavens revealed itself at a time no one expected, for God never leaves the oppressed, no matter how long it takes. But could anyone have predicted that all this would happen from a man who appeared to be helping them? It is the painful truth. One cannot trust a stranger, no matter how kind they seem, unless we truly know them. In the end, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel to watch more new content.